We just go with the flow. We know that.
That's right.
Welcome to Paintbrush and Ivories, the podcast for artists and curious creatives that connects creativity with the heart and soul. I'm Michelle Walker, and I'm here with my creative soul sister, Jennifer Ruth Russell. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Michelle. Here we go. I'm so excited about today and what we're talking about.
So what are we talking about? Do you want to lead us in?
Well, we are going to talk about a body of work.
And how to do one.
And yes, and how to do one. It's very exciting, actually. So I'm going to start with the questions. When do you feel like you started your first body of work?
Oh, that is a really interesting question. I think it goes right back. Probably in recent history, it was definitely the Landweaver series. And that started about 3 years ago. And that was a big body of work. That was about 18 months. Thanks to COVID, it got longer and more expanded and deeper because I had more time. But I think there's also the idea of a lifetime's body of work. And maybe that's what you're getting at. And I know you've got an enormous lifetime body of work with your singing and songwriting. What are you up to now? How many songs have you written and recorded?
Oh, my. I have written a lot of songs. I have recorded and published as of today, actually. Today they published I Am Golden, my latest EP, and that makes it 185.
Whoa.
Yeah, 185, and there's plenty more to go. Yeah.
What about you with that question? When do you think you started your body of work?
I think there was a lot of doodling and, kind of messing around before I realized that I was actually a songwriter. I remember I was playing piano bars around LA, and I was downtown LA in this really cool place that had a upper bar that was antique. You could see a lot of the city. And I was playing some of my own songs, and somebody came up and said, "Well, that means that you're going to start recording them, right?" And I really hadn't thought about it before then.
Yeah, right.
I really hadn't thought about it. It's kind of like that same question that I used to ask kids that would come up and said, "I wrote a song last night." I go, "Great, let me hear it." "Oh, I forgot." What is that thing that makes you start to record things if it's to establish them as a painting or as anything? As I've been thinking about this body of work, I think when you call yourself an artist, when you call yourself a songwriter, at the time you start calling yourself something, it seems that's when the body of work actually begins. That's my perception of it. So my first body of work started after that. I started writing songs for my kid. He was in kindergarten and they needed some good songs, so they were awful. The songs they were teaching him were like, "Oh, come on, I learned those when I was a kid," and they're still awful. So I started then. I started writing songs. But I didn't start recording them until quite a bit later.
Yeah. So I guess we're saying that a good definition of this idea of a body of work to just be useful for this discussion is the entirety of the creative output by an individual. And it could be for a period of time or over their whole lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think I've only become more aware of this concept of a body of work since I've become much more serious with my artwork. I used to make stuff, but that didn't feel like a body of work. So when I was making jewelry, silversmithing, I might make some pieces for a group exhibition, but I never considered that to be a body of work. It was just making stuff. That's how it felt to me. And I think something about the evolution of me with my artistry and the way that I see my art, the role it plays in my life. Now, a body of work has much more meaning and depth and breadth to it as a concept.
And so I want to ask you, do you think your jewelry now is a body of work?
My jewelry is, and so are seasons of it, if you like. So I feel like last year when I released that spring collection of my enameling, that was a body of work. That was 50 pieces. And it took me a kind of concerted, finite amount of time to put it together. And I released it together. And I feel like there's something about the conceptual whole that wraps around a group of things, and the way that they're sent out into the wilds is part of the concept for me about a body of work, rather than just little bits and pieces floating off in the wind. It's a bit more, there's a bit more gravity, and there's a bit more conceptual roundness to it. There's a bit more of a kind of the idea that wraps around all of the work is more whole and thought through. What about you? I mean, it feels like, from witnessing you, it feels like that your CDs and EPs, they've got a roundness to them, haven't they? They've got a family sense to them.
Yes, and I think we could add this definition to the body of work. Is the body of work is the umbrella of it all, but there are collections within the body, or families, like you just called them, of when things come together, because we're always growing as artists. And it's so wonderful to look back at earlier, times, earlier spaces, earlier albums that I've done, because that was a collection. And then moving on to another collection. And as I've grown, because most of my songs are spiritually oriented, all of them are. I'll just come out with it. All of them are. And so they are kind of a documentation of my spiritual growth. And so as there's collections under this body of work, I did write a few pop songs, but my heart wasn't there. So that was very early on. That was when I was going to absolutely be a pop star in Los Angeles.
Okay, good stuff. I feel like I've had phases of artwork, but I don't think of them as bodies of work. So I had a phase when I first started acrylic painting in 2013. I was learning under lovely lady Whitney Freya, who painted a lot of goddesses. And so did I when I was learning under her wing. So that was a phase for me where I painted Buddha faces and goddesses. And I haven't had an urge to go back and do them. And I think looking back, maybe you could consider that to be a body of work, but it feels more like a phase. A body of work for me has a specific goal in mind, even if I don't actually know it when I start out. But what I'm working on right now, and it's at the early stages, is for this exhibition that I've got in May, June next year in 2023 with the lovely Jude White. Hi there, Jude. I was just thinking about it this morning. It's been in a very formative gestation period where I haven't done a lot except start to think ideas and search through what is it that I want to say, what could I say, what do I want to say, what excites me about that. And even though my exhibition, both Landweaver and my contribution to Out of the Blue back in 2021 was all 2D work, I feel very strongly that this next body of work is going to have some small object sculptural pieces in it, partly because of what I want to say. And I don't feel like 2D painting can do it all. I do think there will be some of that in there, but I feel that there's very much this need for object, and my hands have this kind of itchiness to put things together in an assembly kind of sense. And it's interesting that the body of work is for our exhibition. Our working title at the moment is Ash, Mud and Tears, which is all about the fire, the floods and COVID and all the distress that the community has seen in our part of the world. And I really feel that objects play a big part in that. Objects that got burnt, objects that got salvaged, objects that got drowned in the floods, objects that got found and repaired, as all kind of symbols of how we've journeyed through it and symbols of our lives. So that's sort of starting at the middle of my thinking about this body of work. And I think what I love is that I adore the front end of any project. So I know I'm absolutely in my bliss place right now, which is where anything is possible. But the other aspect to starting a body of work with a bit of a goal in mind, so this, for me, it's this exhibition, is just acknowledging that sometimes I have the thought that floats in which says, this is scary and you might not have any more ideas, or you might not do good work. It might not meet your own standards. And so I'm conscious of that, because that thought doesn't always happen in the middle and the end when you've got evidence. For me, it just kind of visits at the beginning of projects if I'm going to have a bit of a wobbly
Oh,
thought about
yes.
anxiety.
At the beginning of every song, it happens for me.
Okay.
But I want to speak into what you've just talked about, because if you're listening to this and you want to begin doing a body of work, I think that having something that you're working towards is so good. Like you're working towards an exhibition. I am doing a body of work right now because this year, and I find that I do this a lot, and I don't know if you do this, Michelle, but what I do is I throw things out in front of me that I have to then do. So I have thrown out in front of me this year, I have a monthly healing meditation called Sanctuary, and we are working on opening each of our 12 chakras, and I am writing a song for each one of those.
Yeah, wow.
So that means that once a month I am writing a song and we're recording it, and then it will be a body of work by the end of the year. So right now I'm on my 7th song. So it's been really exhilarating, but there is also that process, because I just started one today and it's like, oh, is this worthy? Is this piece worthy? Shall I continue? Should I just dump it and start over? You know, that the whole process that you do with creativity.
Mm-hmm.
But I work really good that way. And I love that you said now you're wanting to work more with, more dimensional than 2, right? And I think that's too what has created in my life. Like when I want to experience something new with my artistry, the best way to do that is to set up a body of work to do that, to start experimenting and exploring. That's what I did with the light songs and opulence. That was a completely new way of recording and writing for me spontaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love your concept of throwing stuff out in front and that being like mini goals, knowing that when you reach each of those little mini goals, you're going to have developed a much bigger product or a much bigger thing at the end, which is quite joyful. I like that process. I don't know that I do that, except to say that I probably think of my exhibitions as those things that I throw out in front. I go looking for them, and I actually now have a body sense of the rhythm and the frequency that I'd like to have them in. In fact, when we put in for this application for our regional galleries calendar to be included in their exhibition calendar, it was back in November last year, and we got May, June 2023. That felt like an enormous time. I think in my mind, I was expecting maybe the second half of this year would have been the rhythm. And now I'm really grateful that it came in as May 2023, because the first 6 months of this year was moving house, floods, unpacking, cleaning stuff after floods, trying to find my elbow, that kind of thing as happens. I've still lost things, folks. I still have my gold and my silver, which I wrapped up carefully. I have not yet been able to find it in my unpacking. Can't tell you how sad, and I'd rather have lost a kitchen spoon, but that's not the case. So I just feel like, this sort of arc was internal, and it happened the same through the Landweaver exhibition, my solo, that I was all ready for in October 2020, and it got put off till February, March 2021. And what a great thing that was, that I had an extra 5 months. Although the work wasn't any different from what I put in, I didn't add any more work. I just had more space or something. There was something better about that. So I'm trying to calibrate my internal awareness about my expectations of how long it takes me to do a body of work as I imagine it. And then how it rolls out in reality is a little different.
Yes, as we say in the recording business, it's always 3 times more than you think it's going to be. And you can't push the river. You cannot push the river when there's something that needs to be taken care of. You need to let it have its space if there's something that you have to work on. It's also, we should talk a little bit, I think, about what happens when you're in the middle of a body of work and you feel like you're dead in the water, like there is an emptying of the energy, and then you don't feel the energy to finish at that time. I think it's important to listen to yourself, to listen to your creativity. I like to talk to my artistry. I like to talk to it as if it's an entity because, it's good to check in. Like, what do you want? What do you need right now? What is going on? And I think it's good to be sensitive, because just you've given us some great examples of what I call divine timing, because your
Yes.
time is not always, you can't see as far as your guardian angel can. And, and some things just aren't meant to be in your timeline.
Mm.
And not to get discouraged about that, but to just
No,
have
not
some
at all.
spaciousness. I think the spaciousness is what I'm learning now, put spaciousness around things because I'm driven. Let's get her done. And it's not always appropriate.
I feel sometimes with that lull that can happen with a creative project, I haven't found it in any big projects of mine, but I can find it with individual works, definitely. And I've also learnt for myself, sometimes I need to start something and I am not meant to finish it, but something will have crystallized in the part doingness that is what I need as a stepping stone for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing a little series, a little mini series of paintings called My Flooded Heart, and they're aerial abstracts of the towns in this part of the world that I have a connection to. So the first one I did was Moorlambar, which is obviously my hometown now. But previously I was connected to Lismore, and Lismore is one of the parts of Australia that's been so deeply and heavily affected by the multiple floods earlier this year. And that's also where my enameling studio was and my girlfriend's studios. Also, Mullumbimby was one of the other towns because that's where I teach, and some of my equipment was there when it got flooded. So I'm sort of picking these beautiful towns and doing these little 12 by 12-inch paintings in oils on board. And someone asked me, do you think, is this part of the exhibition? And I stopped and I thought, probably not, maybe, but probably not. But I just need to make them. There was this sort of compulsion that says, this work has to come out of me for whatever reason. And I just trust that while it's sort of aligned but may not end up in the final body of work for exhibition, it's still part of the journey body of work. It's part of my artistry body of work, part of which gets put on exhibition. But the whole thing is the journey. The whole thing is me playing with materials, testing stuff. I was chatting to a lady from a different part of Australia on Instagram this morning, and she was commenting on this aerial imagery that I'd done. And we were talking about gestation periods. And I'm now coming back to something that I tried out back in 2019 when the fires hit, and I was very distressed, and I was just playing around with some ideas. And then I just put them down. They didn't go anywhere. And yet now they're relevant. Now I see an aspect of what I was playing with is something I want to pursue for this Ash, Mud and Tears exhibition, potentially. That's nearly 3 years. And it can take that long. And it was okay for me to have a go and stop right back then because the timing wasn't right. It wasn't the right place, right time for that thing to move forward. Do you do that with songs? Do you get snippets of phrases or riffs or something that you park?
I do. I'm thinking of a song particularly. It's on What the One CD, which was my first Big People's collection, right? Because I had done a lot of children's stuff up to then. And I was then going to Agape International Spiritual Center. And I remember hearing Reverend Michael say one day these words. I wrote them down. I even got the tape. There were tapes then of the service, right? Got the tape. So I made sure that I wrote down these words because they were, with this breath, I thee wed, my true nature, my forever, my being. With this breath, I say yes. And it was like I was hearing sacred texts that were, like the Song of Solomon or something. And I had to write a song. And there were about 3 different versions of that song that just felt like it wasn't hitting the mark. And I allowed myself to keep coming back to it. I'd leave it for a little while, and then finally I hit what is there now, which I truly love. And it's turned out to be a wedding song, which is interesting. Because it is a wedding song, but it's a little different meaning. But I remember taking the sheet music to a practitioner meeting, because I was a practitioner at that time with Agape. And Reverend Michael would always come and lead us. And sometimes there were 150 practitioners there. And he would ask me to come and play a few things on the piano. And I had to ask his permission, right, if I could use these words. I hadn't asked him yet. So I remember putting the sheet music, and his name is right there, and my name, he wrote the words, I wrote the music. And I presented it to him, and he was so excited. He was so excited. And he said, you must play this song for us now. Then that song has also become Dion Mial, who is an amazing singer. He sounds like Johnny Mathis, and he has recorded that song and has taken it to a whole different level than I could, and just been truly remarkable. But I'm grateful that I kept coming back, because I could, me with my short attention span, I could have just like let it go. Say, oh, that's just not going to work. But there was something about these words that I know needed to be put to music. It was really important for me. Yeah. Because as I was looking at ASCAP the other day and all the songs that I published there, I was thinking, oh yeah, but what about this one? And what about that one? I was remembering the ones that didn't make it, that didn't make the recording process. In fact, for this EP that we're putting out right now, I Am Golden, there was a song there that the words were amazing, but it just could not find its place. And we finally just had to put it on the cutting floor saying, okay, well, it's just not happening. And
this time, or
yeah,
in this little collection.
Yeah.
What ends up on the cutting room floor is an interesting thing, isn't it? And that process of editing, and I know I've talked about this before, that's part of the body of work process, is to pull out the parts that need to be in the collection that then get recorded or included in the CD or put on the walls at the exhibition. And that's another aspect to it. Just wondering, I'm thinking about my journey, and at times I actually might seek out art mentoring if it's a really big body of work. And if I'm trying to take on new skills, I might actually go and do a bit of learning along the way, because I know I want to be able to do this thing, this technique, or I want to try and get this particular visual effect. So I might go and explore a bit of study and or mentoring. Do you find yourself doing that, or are you and Michael pretty self-sufficient?
I remember I heard a song, one of Pink's songs, that I thought was just amazing. I was doing a bunch of kids' songs then, and I was working with the virtue of understanding, and I was like, we gotta use this, And so it's more like listening to others and seeing kind of the ingredients that they've used to put a song together and what's exciting about that, And I do that with my music once in a while. I actually have to, just to refresh myself, or else every song would sound like the same song, just with different words. Yeah. Yeah, but I find that my books, the collection, because that is another body of work that I'm developing now, and they are like a whole different process for me. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I've got really a collection of one in my author stable, the one big book, 20,000 Brushstrokes. I haven't really felt moved to go back again, but it definitely had its own process, quite different from the artwork. Though the thing that I do find translates across any medium is this idea of staying connected. Just allowing the ideas to be fresh in the mind and to come at it each day, or, multiple times a week with fresh eyes, and see what then comes up. Because things then happen like what happened to me at 6 a.m. this morning, which is I woke up with an idea. So I have this, this kind of ready-made, and it was almost like my creative self going, come on, wake up, I need to tell you something. And it was precious debris. This body of work, this kind of tactile thing that you're playing with, you're going to call it precious debris for now. And as soon as I woke up and I had it, and it was like, oh, and a whole lot of things kind of came into place. So for me, that only happens when I'm regularly touching in on the ideas, and maybe not in the studio making, but just visiting ideas that inspire me, or in my sketchbook, drawing out ideas, taking notes. And that's another thing that I'd add, for those of us who are visual artists, the idea of capturing our thoughts along the journey of developing a body of work and having that documentation is so important. So images that I've collected in the last 6 months that have inspired me for whatever reason, and that might be a photo I've taken walking along the river, and I sort of just took some images. So those sorts of things go into that notebook, and I keep my ideas, things I can see then really wants to come through by its recurrence, and then building on ideas and images and little drawings and things. So I feel like documentation's a key part of building a body of work, because then when you come to the next body of work, there can be times when you need to flick back and go, now, how was it that I made that thing again? Just revisit some of the making, or maybe the resources and inspiration. You need to touch base again and take them in a different direction next time.
Mm-hmm. You've helped me with that, because you're a Virgo and you have, that sense of order. And it's been really helpful to be your friend.
Thank you. That's so good to know.
I love those moments when you're woken up and the ideas are just flooding. And I'll never forget, Michelle, I was talking about how could I promote something, which was a gathering I wanted to do with Mother Mary. And you said, well, why don't you do some of those meditations that you do with Mother Mary? Why don't you offer those as recordings? And I was like, that's kind of an interesting idea. And that night, when I went to sleep, I had one of those bolting up in the middle of the night, like, oh yeah, why don't we start a podcast? And I'll do 10 of them. That was the beginning. I think we're on 239th episode now
Yeah,
of the
wow.
podcast, Morning Light Meditation. But it was like, oh yeah, it was like Mother Mary was there. We were having this conversation and like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do these shorter meditations. And I did all of them, like 5 a week. And then I
Initially,
came down to 3
you
a
were
week.
very intense. Yeah.
Yes. And then 2 a week. And now I'm doing once a week, which is just plenty for me right now.
Yeah.
And there's a body of work, but it felt very
Absolutely.
organic. It felt very natural. It felt like, and I want to say this to anyone that's listening to this, whatever you're doing now, if you just keep doing it, it will be a body of work.
I agree. I agree. And I think also your idea of being really attuned to, because I remember you telling me when that happened, you were really attuned to the fact that you were so excited, almost revved with this concept of the morning light meditations. And I think that name came to you fairly quickly, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think sometimes a title, a name, even if it's just a working title, for me is like almost like an energy anchor that I can bounce off, and also is both an anchor and a container that I can sort of work around. And so I remember when the birth of Morning Light Meditations happened. And I remember when I wanted to talk to you about the idea of this podcast, and I was thinking, she's never going to go for it, people. She's never going to go for it. She's already got her own podcast. Why would she want to do another one? But this is a different body of work.
It's very different.
It's got a totally different purpose. It brings such a different experience for me, and I love having the conversation with you. So yes, lots of bodies of work. And then there's the big body of work, which is that thing we called life. That our life is our artistry in the way that we live our lives and the way that we create in life. It doesn't necessarily have to be about paintbrush and paint on canvas.
I so agree.
So any other ideas about this concept of how we go about building a body of work? Anything else we want to add?
I think I just want to sum it up this way, that if you have a title for it and if you keep track of what you're doing, you have a body of work. I mean, to me, it's just very simple, but it's always great to just take a pause, like I did this week, and just look at what you've done and have a little celebration, because, and in life, how many of those almighty storms have you walked through and you got to the other side? Oh my God, it's time to celebrate.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So did you celebrate 185 songs written and recorded?
Actually, we celebrated this EP. Yeah. And, I did celebrate because I put that word out to my close family saying, oh, wow, look at this. And how grateful I am to be used this way. How grateful I am that Michael, who has produced and recorded each one of those songs, came into my life. I didn't plan that. It just happened, That was a provision for me.
Yeah.
And I know there's provisions for all of us for what we're here to do.
Yeah, we are supported and supplied. Tell us a little bit about your new EP.
Oh, it's so cool. I Am Golden is a declaration, and it was actually a collaboration with Caroline Oceana Ryan, who wrote the Abundance for All book, and it's a prayer in there. And that also brought in some other beautiful, I love to write songs to texts that move me. In there is a prayer called Celestial Om that is just, it's exquisite. It's just piano and vocal, but it's just, Michael he reminds me of what you were just saying. He is always perfecting the sound and the techniques to be used to get the sound. And I'm just the recipient of this beautiful gift. But Celestial Om is from beloved Rona Herman Vessene, who has been channeling Archangel Michael for like 30 years. And there was one passage in one of her books that just riveted me. And she was delighted that I wrote this song. So now I get to know her on a personal level. She is 95 years young.
Oh, wow.
And, just an incredible soul, still sharp as a tack. And so there were some collaborations there. And also a couple songs that we wanted to remix that I put out as a single. So Speak is on there, which is really an empowerment for your throat chakra and how to speak into life and which you want to see. A Latin piece that I love, Listen to Your Heart. And our good friend, Tom Morgan Jr., once again played his saxophone on several of the pieces, and Michael did his guitar work. And I got to say, my keyboard playing is just getting better and better.
Congratulations. So where can we get a copy of this beautiful new work? I'm looking forward to listening to it, Jen.
Let's put it in the podcast notes, because I just got today, they published it, and so it's now everywhere present. So
it's
hallelujah.
Brand new, hot off the press. Fantastic. Celebrating that with you. Thank you for chatting to me about building our bodies of work in our respective artistry. And I've really enjoyed thinking about that whole topic today. It's been great.
Me too. It's my joy. Thank you.
And if you're listening and you're already fully into your latest body of work, we'd love to hear what you're up to, what you're creating, what inspires you, and what the goal is for you and for your work. We love hearing stories. So thank you to those who send in their messages. And thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time and tuning in to us today. We send you lots of love.
Yes.
Thank you, Jen. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.